G'day everybody, it's Rob from Liquor Consultancy Services. Today's topic, which type of liquor licence do I actually need? In Victoria there's 13 different types of liquor licences that are available for licensees. And what that means is that you're going to have to find out which one of those 13 do you need to operate your licensed premises. And so let's briefly touch on the 13 types. General licences. A general licence is typically available for hotels and pubs, and it allows the consumption of alcohol both on the premises and off. So what that basically means is, and if you think about your local pub, people will actually buy a drink and they'll consume it there at the bar, maybe at the bistro, having a meal, but also when they're finished that they might hop in their car and drive through the drive-through bottle shop and get packaged liquor to take home later. And so that's what that licence will allow people to do. It's probably the most flexible of all of the licences, but the hours are restricted. And what I mean by that, and I'm sure you probably understand this when you've thought about going past your local bottle shop, what happens is at 11 o'clock you'll see that the roller door will come down on the drive-through bottle shop, but the hotel itself might stay open for another couple of hours. And what that basically means is that the hours for on-premises consumption, in other words at the bar, will stay until 1 o'clock or 3 or even later than that. But the drive-through bottle shop, typically 11 o'clock, is as late as you'll be allowed to get packaged liquor. So that's what a general licence is. The other thing to consider with the general licences, especially in those places where there's accommodation, is it also allows for people to consume alcohol at any time as long as they are a resident. So again, if you think of those hotels where there's accommodation, typically they can get room service at any time of the day or night, and the reason for that is that their general licence provides for that. A general licence also allows minors to be on the licensed premises if they are a resident of that hotel. So that's what a general licence is for. The next licence I'd like to talk about, on-premises licence. Now, as the name suggests, on premises. And so people can supply alcohol on the premises, and it can only be consumed on the premises. Now, this is a type of licence that's typically available for licensees of bars, taverns, indeed nightclubs. Some restaurants would have an on-premises licence, but that's unusual. The third type of liquor licence that's available in Victoria is a packaged licence. Bottle shop, supermarkets, those sort of premises. The Dan Murphys of this world, it allows the supply of liquor in sealed containers for consumption off the premises only. So people are only permitted to purchase packaged liquor, but it must be consumed off the premises. Now there is actually one actual exemption to that, and that's in a situation where the supply is free, which is typically going to be those circumstances where licensees have a local vineyard come in and provide wine samplings for people to try before they buy. And as long as it's free, that's okay. Now, sometimes with packaged liquor licenses, it's important to understand that there are restrictions on these, and the premises, if they're going to be a supermarket, they must indeed be a supermarket. They cannot be a convenience store. And the way the law defines that in Victoria is if it's under 240 square metres in size, total size, then it's considered to be a convenience store and therefore is not able to be given a liquor licence. If it's bigger than 240 square metres, then ultimately it has been determined that it is a supermarket and therefore a package licence would be okay. Now those three licences that I've just talked about, they can also be categorised as what's known as late night licences, and they are typically granted to those premises that operate after 1 o'clock in the morning. But it's only available for those three licence types. Probably the most common licence in Victoria is a restaurant and cafe licence. Now, as the name suggests, it's for those premises that are restaurants or cafes, but the main part of this liquor licence is, and this is the important part to remember, is it is only available for licensees where the main activity, and I now emphasise these words, at all times, must be the preparation and serving of meals. And so there's a number of standard conditions that would apply to a restaurant and cafe licence, and typically they relate to the placement of tables and chairs, So there must be tables and chairs available for at least 75% of the people that are in the premises at any one time. There's also a second condition that says the playing of live or recorded amplified music is generally not available after 11 o'clock at night. Now, there's one thing that a restaurant and cafe licence does allow people to do, and that is to be able to be supplied with one bottle of wine to take home at the end of their night. So they must have already dined at the restaurant, and they can only take home wine what they've already they've consumed. And so, in other words, if they haven't finished the bottle, they can take the rest of it home. The next licence I'd like to talk about is a full club licence, and that's typically, as the name suggests, clubs. So your larger sporting and cultural clubs, where there's actually a committee, president, secretary, treasurer, and they're elected each year, and it's only available for those organisations where they are indeed an incorporated club or association. There's a very distinct difference in what it allows members of those clubs to do and non-members. And so for a full club licence, a full member of the club can consume alcohol both on the premises and off. So what that basically means is that they can buy a drink and drink it there, or indeed that they can buy packaged liquor and take it home if that's what they want. If, however, you're a guest of a member, unfortunately all you can do is consume alcohol on the premises. And so there is a distinction between the two types of people. The next licence type I'd like to talk about is a restricted club licence. And so these are smaller cultural and sporting clubs, never with gaming. And it doesn't matter whether you're a member or a guest of a member, this is on-premises consumption only. Now this is where it gets a little bit confusing, because a lot of football clubs, particularly in Victoria, don't seem to have a full appreciation that their licence only allows people to consume alcohol in their licensed premises. And so I do know a number of examples where licensees have allowed players and indeed spectators to consume alcohol outside their club rooms. This is generally not permitted. So clubs, if you're thinking about getting a restricted club licence, have that in the back of your mind. The next licence I want to talk about is pre-retail. And as the name suggests, those licensees that only provide alcohol to holders of other liquor licences, and the sale of alcohol to the public is not permitted. One more licence type, and we're going through these pretty quickly. Producers licence. Winemakers, cider makers, boutique breweries, they're the people that actually make or take the financial risk for the production of those products. It also provides for a cellar door experience. So if you think about some of the vineyards that you might have been around, where you've gone into the cellar door and you've sampled some wines or indeed ciders, etc., and you've made a decision to buy them and take them home. That's perfectly fine, and that's exactly what a producer's licence will allow you to do. It also allows the supply of liquor to holders of liquor licences at any time, anywhere. And so the vineyards, the cider makers, the boutique breweries, they can go around Victoria and they can sell their products to licensees, wholesale. That's perfectly fine. The other thing it also allows them to do is it allows licensees to provide other people's products for on-premises consumption. Now what that basically means is you might, for example, be going a bit of a winery tour and your partner's the one who's driving the car, you're sampling a number of wines, your partner just says, look, I'm driving, I just like a light beer. And so, of course, that's nothing to do with what the producer's actually making, but they sell them that beer and that person can consume it on the premises. That's perfectly fine. Okay, so the next licence I'd like to talk about is major event licence. Now, as the name suggests, a major event. And so this is typically defined as an event that's going to typically attract more than 5,000 people in a premises that is not typically licensed. So my advice to you is if you're thinking about having an event that's going to be attracting more than 5,000 people, you should give some significant consideration to the amount of time that you're going to allow for that licence to be granted, because there's a lot of work that gets done in the background by the local council and indeed the Victoria Police. So please have in the back of your mind that you should be thinking about applying for a major event licence at least 3 months in advance. A very common liquor licence these days also is an annual renewable limited licence. And this is for situations where they are limited in its nature and scope. And this is where it gets very confusing for some licensees. Now, I'll spend a bit of time on this one. Limited in its nature and scope. And so I'm often approached by people who actually have contacted me thinking that they'd like to open up an online retail bottle shop. Unfortunately, the only license that's typically available for them is an annual renewable limited license. And because it must be limited in its nature, there are significant restrictions on what people can actually supply and to the extent of how much. And so if you're thinking about starting up an online bottle shop and you are seriously thinking that you're not wanting these sort of restrictions, then the only option available to you is to actually either open an existing or open up your own bottle shop and operate that under a packaged liquor license. That's the only license that's available to you. A packaged liquor license will allow you to do online sales without those sort of restrictions that would be placed on a renewable limited license. The thing is with the renewable limited license is that they're also used for all these other things that no other license is really available or appropriate for. For example, there are a number of restaurants who provide through Uber Eats and indeed their own delivery service. They provide food, and therefore they have a second liquor license to their restaurant or cafe license. They get the renewable limited, and it allows them to provide with the supply of food a small quantity of alcohol. And so that's available. It's one of those licenses that would sit sort of over the top of a restaurant or cafe license. But they can be standalone, so there are some licensees who, for example, do not have anybody eating in their restaurants. Might be, for example, a straight-out takeaway pizza restaurant. They would just have the renewable limited license, which will allow them to provide alcohol with food. And so that's something to consider when you're thinking about increasing your turnover if you've got that small little business and you're just looking for something else to do. The next liquor license I want to talk about is a temporary limited license. As the name suggests, temporary. One-offs, situations where you either don't have a liquor license at all and you want to provide something. And an example of that might be, for example, you might have inherited a whole lot of wines from a deceased estate, and you're not really got an interest in drinking it, so you decide that you want to sell it online. Well, it's a one-off liquor license that would allow you to be able to provide that. Another situation would be where you actually might be a licensee, and if someone's approached you and said, look, they want to engage you for a birthday party, and your liquor license only goes until, say, 9 o'clock at night, but they want to go until midnight. So you would apply for a temporary limited license to extend your hours. Now, you are entitled to have 6 of these per year. So if you're using it more than 6 times a year, you need to think about other options. Of course, for those licensees that really have no interest in providing alcohol to their customers, typically restaurants, there is available a BYO permit, which will allow people to bring their own. And it would be in a situation where it's either a restaurant or a club that doesn't otherwise have a liquor license. You can actually get a BYO permit, which will allow people to bring their own, consume it in your restaurant or your club, and then take home what they don't drink. And the 13th type of license or a permit that's available is a BYO permit for party buses. Those commercially operated party buses that operate in designated areas, they need to get a permit so that they can actually be controlled in those entertainment precincts, and so they don't misbehave, and they're regulated to some extent. In my experience, there are very few of those around these days. I think they existed way back in the 90s and the early 2000s, but they no longer exist today. Okay guys, well that's the 13 liquor licenses. I hope that gives you a bit of a feel for what you may need to do in relation to operating your business. By all means, if this little video hasn't answered the questions that you really need, you'll see there's a link on the screen in front of you with our contact numbers. Give me a ring and I'll be more than happy to support. In the meantime, just be safe, licensees, and keep making lots of money. And cheers to you, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye for now.